In the peaceful but quietly complicated American town of Willow Ridge lived a 62-year-old widow named Margaret Hale, a woman everyone believed was painfully poor, worn out, and simply surviving on odd house-cleaning jobs. But behind her calm eyes and tired smile lived a secret life that no one, not her neighbors, not her friends, and certainly not her children, ever even imagined. Every morning at 5 a.m., she tied her silver hair into a neat bun, packed a tiny sandwich, wore the same faded coat she had worn for 15 years, and rode her old bicycle across town to clean kitchens, mop floors, scrub bathrooms, and dust shelves for families who barely noticed her presence. Yet not once did she complain or ask for more, even when her hands trembled from age and exhaustion, even when her back ached so badly she could barely stand. Her two grown children, Jason and Emily, visited her rarely, and when they did, their visits were harsh, cold, and filled with judgment. Jason criticized her for not living properly, telling her she embarrassed him by living like a poor woman, while Emily often snapped that she should move to a nursing home because people whispered about how pathetic it was that she still worked such a low job at her age. But Margaret never responded angrily, never defended herself, never told them the truth that would change everything, instead softly saying, "One day, my children, you will understand why I live this way," words that only irritated them further. Because they believed their mother had lived a meaningless life of poverty and struggle without trying to improve anything, little did they know, for over 30 years, Margaret had been quietly investing every extra dollar from her cleaning jobs, not in luxuries or comfort, but in real estate, land auctions, small motels, and most shockingly, a nearly unknown energy company, once called Solonext, that she believed in because her late husband, who died young, had told her solar energy would rule the future. And while people mocked her for wasting money, she kept investing, studying, learning, and making strategic decisions late at night in a tiny storage unit she rented where she kept notebooks full of numbers, receipts, and growth charts. And now, after decades of silent discipline and sacrifice, Margaret Hale was worth $18.7 million, yet chose to live simply so that her children would learn the value of life before they ever touched a single dollar of her wealth. But fate had its own plan, and one freezing winter morning, after finishing her last cleaning shift of the day, Margaret collapsed at a bus stop, her frail body unable to fight the cold wind, and though an elderly stranger rushed her to the hospital, Jason and Emily only arrived hours later, frustrated and complaining as if her sickness was an inconvenience to them, not a tragedy, and when the doctor told them her heart was weak and needed rest, Jason's first question was whether she had any money for treatment, while Emily muttered that Margaret should have taken better care of herself instead of overworking. Margaret listened quietly, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of pain and love, and whispered only 3 words, "Don't worry, children," words that would later haunt them forever. 2 weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving the small town grieving more than her own children, for the neighbors knew her kindness, her generosity, her willingness to do anything for anyone. But Jason and Emily only argued bitterly about who would handle the leftovers of her life, expecting nothing more than debts, worn clothes, and perhaps a few old utensils. But when they entered the lawyer's office for the reading of the will, the air changed. Tension, guilt, confusion, and a subtle sense of something coming that neither of them was prepared for. The lawyer opened a heavy brown envelope and began reading Margaret's will, which started with a line that froze their hearts. "To my children who believed I lived a poor life, I leave behind the truth you never asked to know." And as she continued, revealing the shocking amount of wealth Margaret had left behind, $18.7 million in investments, property holdings, land titles, stock certificates, and rental incomes. Jason gasped, Emily choked, and both stared in disbelief, unable to understand how the woman they mocked and ignored had quietly built an empire while they assumed she was penniless. But the shock didn't end there, for the lawyer also read Margaret's strict conditions. Jason and Emily were required to volunteer at the Willow Ridge homeless shelter for 1 full year, attend financial education classes every Saturday for 6 months, and live in Margaret's tiny, old home for half a year. without selling or renovating it, so they could understand the meaning of sacrifice, humility, and discipline. If they failed any of the conditions, the entire $18.7 million fortune would be donated to charity, a rule Margaret created with intention. She didn't want her children to inherit wealth until they understood the values behind it. Jason exploded in anger, yelling that the conditions were ridiculous, while Emily cried that she couldn't live in that embarrassing tiny house. But the lawyer simply said, "Your mother loved you deeply." This was not punishment. This was her final lesson, and eventually, driven by greed more than love, they accepted. The first weeks at the homeless shelter were miserable, as they cleaned tables, served food, listened to stories of suffering, and realized many people there knew their mother intimately. One woman said, "Your mom used to come here every week with bags of fresh food. She never wanted credit. She just wanted to help." Words that hit Jason like a punch to the chest as he remembered ignoring her calls for years. In financial classes, they learned how brilliant Margaret was, how she had turned small pennies into millions through patience, knowledge, and discipline. And the more they studied her notebooks, the more they saw her intelligence, her calculations, her strategies, and her unmatched dedication. Living in her tiny home broke them emotionally, for every corner held a memory. The rocking chair she used to rest in, the old radio she played every morning, the knitted blankets she made during winter, and a kitchen table scarred with years of use but filled with warmth. And slowly, Jason and Emily began to feel the weight of regret pressing onto their souls as they realized how selfish, ungrateful, and blind they had been. They cried for hours, reading her old letters, finding her photographs, and remembering her soft voice saying, "One day you will understand." And slowly, they did. As the year passed, they volunteered more willingly, helped more sincerely, and even used their skills to improve the shelter and help its people find work, feeling the same joy Margaret must have felt. Then, on the last day of their one-year condition, they found a hidden envelope behind an old framed photo of Margaret and their late father, and inside was a letter written in her gentle handwriting. "My children, I lived simply not because I was poor, but because I wanted to show you that strength is not in wealth, but in character. Money can buy comfort, but only empathy can buy peace. I did not want you to grow up rich. I wanted you to grow up good." A message that shattered the last piece of pride they had left. By the time they completed the conditions, they were no longer the same Jason and Emily who once judged their mother, for they had now inherited not only her fortune, but her here.